A Date for Two, +1. Written by inkinmyheartandonthepage, and read for you by Eleanor Elizabeth. Summary. Tony Stark and Stephen Strange are finally going on a date after months of flirting. Only Tony forgot that he doesn't have a babysitter for his son Peter, and Stephen doesn't know about him. They had been flirting for months. The first time Tony Stark and Dr. Stephen Strange had met, it was at a benefit. While the two worked in very different fields, they still ran in the same circles. Tony had been drawn to the tall, well-dressed doctor the first time he'd locked eyes on him. The sharp cheekbones, the startling grey eyes that locked with Tony's across the room had been enough to get Tony's attention, and something to stir low in his gut. It hadn't taken long for them to gravitate towards one another, introducing themselves and falling into conversation. The conversation had quickly turned into a sassy, witty debate that kept Tony on his toes for the rest of the evening, until the two of them were the only ones remaining. They had been politely but firmly asked to leave, and Tony had returned to the tower, feeling energised in a way he hadn't in a long time. Over the next few weeks, Tony's thoughts often filtered back to the doctor, wondering if he would ever see him again. The next time Tony had been invited to a benefit, Pepper had hardly had to start her pitch as to why he had to go before he was agreeing. Her look of surprise had turned into one of suspicion, but Tony had dived back into his work before she could question him. To his secret delight, Stephen had been there again. The two of them had gravitated towards each other once again, spending the rest of the evening conversing. Tony would have stayed chatting with the doctor longer, but they had been interrupted by several important figures at the event. Tony didn't get the chance to say goodbye before he was dragged away. By the time he could politely peel away, Stephen was nowhere to be seen, and Tony left the event feeling disappointed. The third event they had both attended, they had barely had the chance to say hello before they were interrupted. The next day, Tony was still thinking, and he was not pouting, Grody, about the doctor when a brilliant idea struck him. He had noticed what the doctor had been drinking at the previous events and had Jarvis order a bottle and send it to the doctor, along with his personal phone number. Tony was delighted when the doctor texted him. "Thanks for the drink. Perhaps at the next event you'll have one with me? SS." Tony had smirked, a flutter erupting behind his ribcage. Tony hadn't been able to attend the next event. It was nearing 9 o'clock when Tony's personal phone had buzzed. He opened the message, his face blooming into a smile as he read over it. "I'm disappointed, Stark, and here I thought I would have at least one intelligent person to speak with tonight. SS." Chuckling quietly to himself and feeling pleased, Tony sent a quick text back. "Sorry to disappoint. Have a drink on me? TS. I will collect. Tomorrow. Are you free at 2? SS." Tony's heart thumped in his chest. "I'm free. Coffee? TS." Stephen sent back the name of a cafe and the address, making Tony grin. A small cough had Tony's attention snapping down, and a smile fell from his face. They had been flirting for months, all leading to this moment, and Tony had forgotten about his 4-year-old son Peter. Peter Stark had been a surprise, but the best thing that had ever happened to him. Tony had kept Peter a secret, keeping him out of the spotlight of the media, not wanting his son to experience the same things he had at that age. When Tony had important events to attend, he would get a babysitter to watch Peter, but Tony had forgotten that his babysitter had caught the same cold that Peter had and was out sick for the next few days. He had nobody to watch Peter, which was why he couldn't attend the event tonight. Tony looked down at Peter, who was sprawled across his lap, fast asleep. The cold was, thankfully, petering out, and just a small cough remained. It was no longer contagious, and the colour was slowly spreading back into his cheeks, much to Tony's relief. Tony bit his lip and sighed. Carefully, he ran a hand through Peter's curls, his son shifting and snuggling into Tony's touch. When Peter had first come into his life, Tony knew he had to change. He stopped his partying ways, cut back on his drinking, and stopped the one-night stands. Since Peter, he hadn't been out on any dates, and it hadn't mattered because Tony had Peter. Stephen Strange was the first person to catch Tony's attention since becoming a parent. He had no idea how Stephen was going to react to Peter. Tony suspected he would find out soon. "Can I have a milkshake?" Tony looked down at Peter, who was looking at him with wide, pleading eyes. Peter had been stuck drinking juice and water since his cold, and had been very excited when Tony had told him they were going out to a cafe. "Yeah, kiddo," Tony chuckled, squeezing Peter's hand as they walked down the street towards the cafe. "You know what flavour you want?" "Chocolate, please," Peter gasped, giving a little jump. When they reached the cafe, Tony led Peter inside. The place was larger than Tony was expecting and filled with a few patrons. They ignored Tony as he scanned the room, looking for Stephen. He spotted the doctor towards the back of the cafe. Tony swallowed as Stephen gave a little smirk and a head tilt. "Come on, kiddo, over here," Tony said, as his hand tightened around Peter's. They weaved through the tables, Tony catching the moment that Stephen caught sight of Peter, his face flickering with surprise. When they reached the table, Tony paused, his heart hammering in his chest. "Hey," Tony managed to get out. "Hello," Stephen said, his voice just as deep as the last time Tony had heard it. His eyes darted towards Peter before looking back at Tony. "Who's your friend?" Stephen, this is my son Peter. Peter, this is my friend Stephen, Tony introduced. Hi! Peter grinned and gave a little wave. It's nice to meet you. Stephen's face softened as he looked at Peter. Hello, Peter. It's nice to meet you too. I'm going to have a milkshake, Peter grinned toothily at Stephen. Excellent choice, Stephen smiled. Milkshakes here are the best. Stephen's eyes flickered back towards Tony, his smirk deepened. Are you going to sit? Tony rolled his eyes and helped Peter into a seat before taking one next to him. To Tony's relief, the date went well. Stephen had adapted to the sudden appearance of Peter very easily and included him in the conversation and seemed to be taken by his son. They started at the cafe until Peter grew tired, quietly starting to nod off at the table. As promised, Tony paid for the drinks. As they exited the cafe, Tony swung Peter into his arms, his son cuddling into his neck, his breaths coming out in small puffs. Sorry, Tony said, rubbing his hand up and down Peter's back as he looked at Stephen. He's been sick, and so he's been tired. I know you weren't expecting this. Tony, Stephen interrupted. He smiled as Tony's mouth snapped shut. I was admittedly surprised. I take very few people know about Peter. Yeah, Tony said quietly. Stephen nodded, seeming to understand. To Tony's surprise, he looked almost pleased. While being surprised, I was not disappointed. I enjoyed our afternoon together. I did too, Tony smiled, feeling himself relax with relief. I would like to do this again, Stephen said, stepping closer to Tony and Peter. With Peter too, and just us, if that's something you're interested in. Oh, I'm interested, Tony smirked, running his eyes up and down the doctor. Very interested. Good, Stephen smirked. I would hate to continue to go to these events alone. They were very tedious until I met you. Come home with us, Tony blurted out, hefting Peter higher up his hip. Have dinner with us, I mean. Yeah, more milkshakes, Peter mumbled tiredly, his eyes barely open. Tony chuckled, gently soothing Peter as he looked at Stephen. The doctor's face softened further, and he nodded. Yes, I would like that. Tony grinned, relief flooding through him. There was a spark, too, that sent Tony's heart thumping in his chest. Together they fell into step, walking down the streets of New York and towards something new and exciting, and Tony couldn't wait to see where it took them.